I'm Jim Compton.
And I'm Kirk Williams. This is Manitoba's last frontier, the North. 30 years ago, Manitoba Hydro discovered gold in these waters, the gold of hydroelectric power. It conquered the North with a zeal unmatched in the province's history. Dynamite, concrete, and steel were the tools, prosperity for all, the promise.
In the shadow of the dams, a painful reality, an environmental wasteland, native rights cast aside, political scandal, and a multi-billion-dollar debt, all in the name of power. Over the next 5 nights, we'll investigate the real costs of power. Tonight, part 1, after the flood.
As far as I can remember, there was an abundance of fish to catch, wildlife to hunt, animals to trap.
Indian people always visualize the land as being their mother. If in fact you lost your mother, I wonder what value you would place on your mother because she has been injured or destroyed.
You feel like a person destroyed a thing you love, the land. If it's destroyed, it's never going to be returned back to normal.
Blood flowing through the veins of Mother Earth. This is how the Cree in northern Manitoba see these rivers. This lifeblood has sustained them for centuries. It carried them to their hunting grounds. It brought the fish in abundance. It attracted the beaver and other fur-bearing animals to its edge. It fed them, clothed them, sustained them. "30 years ago, these concrete tourniquets began to strangle the rivers. The Cree were shocked. They feared the white man's technology would kill their rivers and their livelihood. For Manitoba Hydro, these mega projects were feats of engineering brilliance, built exclusively in the untouched north to bring cheap power to the south. With that promise came the first of these mega projects, 400 kilometers north of Winnipeg at Grand Rapids. It was dubbed the Pearl of the North, the beginning of Manitoba Hydro's grand plan and the end of a way of life. Upstream from the dam lived the Cree Achimauhowan. They say Hydro's pearl does not sit well within its oyster. The pearl has destroyed and altered their world. In the summer of 1960, Manitoba Hydro told the 300 people of Chimauhowan their homes and their graves would be flooded. They would have to move out. Several of Walter Mink's relatives are buried here, somewhere under the water. When they moved, they left behind traditional hunting, fishing, and trapping grounds, which are now mostly ruined.
$1 million reserve that we had here. Everything was here. We had moose, we had fish, waterfowl, all kinds. Sturgeon, everything that lives in the water. We had it all. We're losing everything now just because of water. Water kills everything.
The Chimauhowan Cree were transported into another world, given land and new housing. Hydro promised them a better life, filled with white man's amenities. That life took root here in Easterville. Everything was different. There were roads, cars, electricity, stores. The people no longer lived off the land. They lived off welfare.
It's all total change. People are dying. This community is dying with alcohol, drugs, diseases, you know, the insanitary conditions of the community. One innocent little group of people back in 1960 were the victims in the name of progress for Manitoba. The people of Chimoin have been told, you have participated, you have contributed a great positive contribution to Manitoba. If you ask any elder, was it worth it? Was it worth it? Was it worth $1 million or $100 million? He'll say no. There's no money in this world there's no money value in this world that will ever replace of what these people lost.
With Grand Rapids up and running, hydro engineers focused their attention on another powerful northern river, the Nelson. Hydro had an ambitious plan: build a series of power stations along the Nelson and alter one of the largest bodies of fresh water in the world. Lake Winnipeg would be turned into a giant storage tank from which water could be released to power the generators along the Nelson River. The gatekeeper is the Genpeg Dam and Generating Station, controlling how much water flows north and how much backs up on Norway House. 5,000 people live here. They settled here because hunting was good. Today the land is often flooded. Most of the waterfowl has disappeared. James Maminawadam remembers when the community used to feed their families by hunting. That tradition is dead.
When the hydro came in, that's when I started to notice the waterfall decreasing to the point where there is almost none. I think the reason is because the eating areas for the ducks have dried and the water fluctuates.
Every day, Norway House social worker Brian Cromarty sees how the flooding has affected his people.
And whatever affects the land and nature feel, the people that live there feel it as well. And it's caused a lot of, like I say, a lot of anger, a lot of frustration, a lot of sadness, bitterness in our people, and it's caused a lot of social problems as well.
On the other side, downstream of Genpeg, the shadow cast looms long as well. Cross Lake, here the water is gone.
As a boy, I recall that we can go swimming practically any spot, anywheres along the river in our community here. For example, where I grew up, it was only a matter of getting out of the house, not more than 100 feet, you could already hit the water.
Cross Lake Councillor Ernest Munias says his people knew the water like the palm of their hand.
The water was our, one of our system of transportation, day or night. We could travel the waters here with our boats without having to worry about hitting a reef or a rock.
Charlie Osborne has fished Cross Lake his whole life. The low water is now a stranger. The fish are harder to find.
Manitoba Hydro really did a lot of damage, and when I travel around here, I feel hurt inside from what I see. I really do feel hurt sometimes. I get sick over that.
The people say their spirit has been drained along with the river. Elders feel the goodness of the river has abandoned them because they failed to protect it.
They had a spiritual mandate to protect the land and all the life there in the land. they envision themselves as being a part of the land. They're a part of that great cycle of life. And every creature and every creation dependent upon each other's survival, you know, and the health of that cycle of life are dependent on the entire health and wholeness of the community.
I think we were being sacrificed, thrown into the fire. Never mind these people. We must get this power. Power for the South into the United States. All the power comes from the north, as you can see, eh? They all go down south. The transmission lines go south. Power.
When we come back, the other half of the grand scheme, moving one of Canada's greatest rivers and the devastation left in its wake. The Churchill. It was considered one of Canada's greatest rivers, unharnessed power, flowing from the west across 3 provinces. Its rich shores and water feeding fish and wildlife, and the people who lived there, until the 70s. Hydro developed a plan, unlike anything tried before in the north. Divert the Churchill River 200 miles to fuel the Nelson's thirsty generating stations, Kettle Rapids, Long Spruce, and Limestone. The Churchill River was dammed here at Missy Falls. The lower Churchill, once a great river, is now a rock garden. Chris Campbell used to guide tours on the river from the town of Churchill. His business dried up. 5 kilometers upstream is as far as he can go.
Before that diversion, a guy could cruise anywhere in here. And don't have to worry about any, you know, no rocks. You could walk across here. You could walk across over there. Can't use a boat. It buggered everything up. You can't go nowhere. You got to stay around town, or if there's a storm, and that's it. Go to the bar. That's about it.
Oh, this place here, pretty hard for me to talk about. My whole life was out here. All the years I've been in Churchill. For my family and I, we spent all our summers and our vacations up here. But we were told we had to go. And
Churchill residents like Ray Wazolkowski were forced out of their fishing and hunting cottages. Hydro expropriated the property and paid them off. The buildings were burned to keep people away from the low river.
sit back and cry, I guess. That's about all we can do. They don't want to listen to us. There should have been more studies. There should have been more studies done. Because I don't think the engineering department knew actually what the hell they were playing with. They know they made a big mistake now. Man's supposed to be pretty smart. But I don't call this smart. This is totally ignorant to me, to ruin something that's been so beautiful. One of the best fishing places in North America. You know, unbelievable. Now you can't even catch a fish, you know.
There is also bitterness on the other side of Missy Falls Dam, where the Churchill River is backed up through southern Indian Lake, its water flooding thousands of square kilometers of pristine wilderness. A once thriving and bountiful watershed has become an environmental nightmare. This was the first time Manitoba Hydro flooded land this far north, a land made up of permafrost. It's half ice, it's half soil. When you put it underwater, it melts. What's left of the land crumbles into the lake. Southern Indian Lake is now a vast polluted slough. It used to be one of the best sources of grade A whitefish in the world. The 1,000 people living on the lake shores had a successful commercial fishery here.
There's my 24 cents.
After the flood in 1976, the catch fell to 1/3. The fishery even shut down for several years. Today, there are only a few fishermen left struggling to keep it going. It's frustrating for anyone who goes out on the lake. Fisherman Robert Baker.
I guess it's on account of this flood and it's playing around with that water going up and down. Because they sure haven't found their spawning grounds well around here too. Like the way the water goes up and down. And a lot of sticks floating around and whatnot. And then when you go to the shoreline to fish from there, you only wreck your nets because willows and trees sticking out of the water. If they'd have left nature alone, I think we'd have been all right yet. Because I can't see why they should come and destroy these lakes.
No one knows when the shoreline will stop eroding and polluting the lake. This has caused another problem Hydro didn't foresee. There's naturally occurring mercury in the soil here. So as the land collapses into the lake, mercury leaches into the water. It eventually contaminates the fish. Contaminated fish is hard to sell. It also makes the people here afraid to eat as much fish as they used to. They know mercury can lead to health problems. From the time they are very young, the people eat fish from the lake every day. That's changed now. Hair samples are taken to test for mercury poisoning. Too much of it in the blood can damage the nervous system. Mercury translated into Cree is poison.
It's a disease, eh? Like people get it and they don't feel right. They don't feel they're not healthy. Eat the wrong fish. It was pretty high here for quite a while, but according to the tests they give out to people, it's going down, eh?
People who have a higher level are told which fish are safer to eat. If they're too high or they're consuming a large amount of fish, then they're told maybe to cut back, eat other things, buy fish.
Other sources of food are also gone. Gathering berries or plants for medicine is almost impossible now. People can no longer look to the land for help.
Now everything is gone. Even ducks, it all disappears. They don't stick around anymore. Everything, moose, deers, everything. Caribous, they don't move up here anymore. You go way up north. They don't stick around here. Because we never used to get the welfare before, in normal years. Everybody was doing all right. Everything was managed to live nice, eat good every day, instead of welfare,
Changes at South Indian Lake have come hard and fast. For thousands of years, the many bays and rivers were the large domain of the people. Today, the places they once called home are underwater. The community is now clustered on a tiny stretch of shoreline. Hydro built them a new town site. Homes complete with electricity and telephones. Now people pay utility bills they say they cannot afford.
I think we would have been a lot happier and better off if we were left alone. We could have done without hydropower, that's for sure.
These changes have transformed a once proud independent people. They're scared about the future.
I'm worried what's going to happen to the future, our kids and their kids. I can't tell you what the future is going to be like for them. There's no jobs around, not enough jobs for everybody, not enough fishing, not enough trapping is really dying out right now because you can't depend on the trapping, But you pretty well have to go to welfare. You have no choice.
The people of South Indian Lake bear the scars of forced change. So do thousands of other Northerners. For a generation, they watched helplessly, in disbelief, as the powers in the South have changed their homeland and uprooted their lives. At twilight, there is talk of fighting back. They realize it may be too late for their generation to recover. These people say they must take up the fight for future generations.
I think like in the past few years, we've started working on making our community what it used to be before, or towards what it used to be before, where we can be an independent community and solve some of the problems that we've encountered through the flooding of the lake.
It's scary, and I think people are scared and don't know for sure in the future. I think we hope for the future things will get better, that there'll be jobs for our people, and that people will get off welfare and be back to the way it was before. But it's hard to say. I have 2 children growing up in the community. When I think about their future, I think about them leaving here. I can't picture them here. I don't know what they're going to do here.
I can see not much of a future for my kids as far as fishing and trapping. I don't think it'll ever be the same as it was before. So I encourage my children to go to school, get an education, and pick up a trade. You know, something like other than being a fisherman or a trapper. I'd like to see them grow up and get a good education and do something. Maybe come back and help us later on.
The changes to this northern world have been vast. For about 15,000 Cree, it has meant the end of a fiercely self-sufficient life and the beginning of a new existence in a strange, disfigured landscape. For 24 hours, I'm Jim Compton.
Lighting up the future.
It's northern rivers like this one that drive Manitoba Hydro's turbines. Turbines that promise to generate electricity and wealth. I'm Jim Compton. This week, 24 Hours is taking a 5-part investigative look at hydroelectric development in Manitoba. Last night, the tragic cost of that power to a land and its people.
I'm Kirk Williams. Tonight, the other side of the story. Hydro development has been part of Manitoba's history. Political careers have been built. Governments have been elected on promises of jobs and a guaranteed energy supply for Manitobans or anyone who wanted to buy it. Tonight, part 2 of our series, The Power Brokers.
I think that it's a magnificent prospect because the investment of $800 million in the development of one of our greatest natural resources, the hydropower of the Nelson River, would be a wonderful boost to every aspect of the economy of Manitoba.
I happened to be along in a period of history, of time, when I had the responsibility to make sure that we didn't get halfway up the mountain and then stall out.
These projects have harnessed one of the greatest natural power sources in the world and enriched the physical legacy that we will leave for the Manitobans of tomorrow.
For 3 decades, politicians shared the same vision. Focused on the wild, untamed rivers of Manitoba's north. The vision: capture the river's life before it flows into the sea. Use it to fuel the province's economy and political ambitions. More than 10,000 Cree living in the north wanted their rivers left alone. Charlie Osborne was one of them. He was afraid of what would happen to his community of Cross Lake if the rivers were changed. The government and Manitoba Hydro told him not to worry.
We were told that they could build as many dams as they wanted to, and we wouldn't be able to stop them.
Plans were in place. Power stations would be built along the Nelson River, big power stations. Engineers said those stations would need more water than even the Nelson could deliver. So they would divert the Churchill River into the Nelson. The water level of southern Indian Lake would rise. People living on southern Indian Lake didn't like Hydro's plan. They knew Hydro only wanted one thing.
They're after the high water for hydro purposes, and that's the main goal. They took it. No matter what they damaged, they just went ahead. They think they know better. That's why they went ahead.
Native people say they predicted the devastation that followed. They tried to tell Hydro's experts the diversion would destroy their lake. South Indian Lake elder John B. Moose remembers arguing with Hydro people over and over again.
But he tried to tell me what's good for me on the lake, but he doesn't know. He only trying to explain it to me, you know, but he can't explain it to me because I know how it is. I've been traveling around the lake all my times. Big changes.
Walter Weir's conservative government tried to gag all opposition to hydro development. A government-sponsored report that condemned the project was covered up. A bill was introduced to block environmental hearings. The legislature erupted into a ferocious debate that thundered through Manitoba. The Conservatives were forced to call an election. New Democrat Ed Schreier campaigned with the slogan, "Humanity First." He promised to re-examine Hydro's plans for the North with an open mind. On June 25, 1969, Weir's Conservatives were out, Schreier's New Democrats were in. Residents of South Indian Lake thought they had won. They would not be flooded out of their homes. Celebrations quickly turned to despair. The new government announced the diversion was going ahead. The Missy Falls Dam was built, cutting off the Churchill River. Water backed up into southern Indian Lake. Under the former Conservative government's plan, the lake would have risen 10 meters, completely submerging the community. The New Democrats raised the lake 3 meters, sparing most of the homes. Still, the damage was catastrophic. Thousands of kilometers of shoreline collapsed into the lake, leaching deadly mercury into the food chain, destroying commercial fishing in the area for years.
You pick up all of that energy and all of that water and you dump that into this little landscape of small streams, and of course it just destroys that whole landscape. It tears it to bits.
Bob Newberry is an engineer who studies rivers. He fought against Hydro's design, which tried to squeeze as much energy out of the rivers as it could. He failed to convince the government of the day that a less ambitious plan would have generated all the energy needed.
Hydro projects can be well designed. They can be skillfully designed, and they can have benefits. Who shares those benefits is a principal factor. How the design is done so that the environment is still maintained is the second major factor. We've ignored both of those things in Manitoba, and that's why we're paying this price. There's absolutely no gain in destroying that much environment.
More environment was destroyed. Lake Winnipeg itself became a huge reservoir, its levels manipulated to serve the needs of generating stations on the Nelson River.
We said we would minimize the flooding, and I, quite frankly, my soul is content on that. We did reduce the amount of the raising of the water from something like 35 feet down to 10, and the community was not transplanted.
2 decades later, former Premier Ed Schreier believes he made the only decision he could. He says his other options were to flood all of South Indian Lake or not to build. Both were out of the question.
It would be fine to back down if you didn't leave as a wasted investment then something like $200-300 million, because don't forget that Kettle Rapids was already 1/4, 1/2 under construction by the time we were sworn to office.
Money and jobs may have prevented Schreier from stopping, but other people were struggling to protect their future. The Cree of South Indian Lake took their case to court. Udi Hentelif was one of their lawyers.
What got lost was the faith which had developed in a whole group of people who told the truth, who justifiably felt that once they told the truth, they'd be listened to. And they felt a tremendous sense of betrayal.
Betrayal because the Schreier government withdrew funding for the Cree's legal costs. It came just as the Cree were asking the courts for an injunction to stop construction.
The deliberate act on the part of Hydro to accelerate the program in development of something like as quickly as possible, breaking every single rule in terms of natural justice that you could possibly have wanted to, and should have applied, in order to make sure that the project would have been so far advanced that no court would ever have granted an injunction and it would never be stopped.
I remember one of the people that came down from South India and stopped the judge on the way out and said, you know, the thing we've always been told ever since we can remember is that in the white man's court you had a chance to be heard. And I came from my trap line and you won't hear me.
The momentum to build intensified. The choice for politicians, keep building or allow native people to stop construction. It came down to money and jobs.
Once you expend and commit to a multi-hundred-million-dollar project and you've got thousands of men online, you just can't freeze and stop dead in your tracks and sit there.
It's a totally racist attitude. The attitude is, why should we have persons who are simply living off the land and not making much use of it? Why should we permit them to stop development, economic development? Why should they stand in the way of progress?
People affected by hydro blame the utility and the government for the loss of their traditional lifestyle. Both are seen as villains who robbed them of their right to live off the land. They now live in poverty, dependent on welfare.
I think, ironically, hydro is one of the better symptoms, not one of the worst.
Schreier says there is no connection between poverty on reserves and hydro development.
I'm sure you would agree with me in a split second when I say that many of the problems being faced are being faced by all of the communities across the north, including those who are many, many miles removed from the Nelson River.
Schreier says the communities harmed by hydro have stabilized, even bounced back. He says fishing in southern Indian Lake has returned to historic peaks. The fishermen say they have to go farther to catch fish, using more fuel. Their nets are torn on debris left from the flooding, and the costs keep going up. Robert Baker says he can't make a living.
If fishing keeps on dropping like this, the younger fellas ain't going to have a chance of knowing really how to fish. And they'll not only not know how to fish, but then they won't be able to find nothing in the lake.
Scientists predict it will be at least 60 years before mercury contamination in fish begins to return to safer levels. It could take hundreds of years before the eroding shoreline stops crumbling into the lake. Along the Churchill River, more problems. People living downstream from the Missy Falls Dam found the quality of their drinking water dropped as fast as the river. It became sluggish and stagnant. The intake pipe for the town of Churchill's drinking water sucked up salt water. Hydro had to move the intake and build a $5 million water treatment plant. While people are happy they now have clean drinking water, there's still bitterness. People here say a promise was made before the dam was built. A promise they would still be able to use the river for fishing and boating. Jewelry store owner Ed Baslick has been leading a campaign for 15 years, demanding that Hydro bring the level of the Churchill River back up to normal.
Hydro can come along and kill 400 miles of fish. That's okay, right from Missy Falls all the way to Churchill. You know, they don't seem to hesitate and regret that.
We say, didn't you know that God has died and left Manitoba Hydro in charge? Because virtually what Manitoba Hydro wants, Manitoba Hydro gets in the northern scheme of things.
Former Churchill Mayor Mark Ingebrigtsen says the North gets run over by the momentum of mega project decision-making.
When something like that gets rolling, it's full speed ahead and damn the consequences. And the consequences come and then we have to pay for it later because of lack of real planning in the forefront.
Manitoba Hydro is working hard to put the past behind it. Those who ran the utility 20 years ago are gone. replaced by people like Bob Brennan.
So,
As Hydro's president, he'll only talk about what the corporation is doing today.
The challenge is to try to meet our obligations that are outstanding today. That is the challenge, as I see it. It's certainly not, you know, like I can't change the facilities that are already built. What we have to do is get on with either mitigating the impacts of it or settling our obligations associated with it. But we are where we are.
Settling past obligations is expensive. Here at Cross Lake, where the water disappeared, the utility is spending $11 million on a weir, raising the lake another meter. Other lakes are being cleaned up and restocked with fish. More than $250 million has been paid to native bands. Another $250 million is on the negotiating table. The bill is split 3 ways, among Hydro, the province, and Ottawa. 2 decades ago, building dams on the Nelson River was thought to be the cheapest way to go. Clearly, the estimates of decision makers back then are off by hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, it's taxpayers that must pay, not only for the social and environmental costs, but for decisions blurred by politics.
We build power dams and then we try to find a market for the power. And we sell it off pretty cheap.
Dave Young was a planner in the provincial government. He's now a consultant on hydro issues. Young says government borrowing to build dams only stimulates the economy for a short time.
Hydroelectric development is all over when the dam is built. There's almost nothing generated beyond that. And so the only way that you can keep a stimulation, can maintain some stimulation of the economy with hydroelectric development is to keep building one dam after another.
It's a strategy one government after another has used. Construction of the limestone dam was stopped after $100 million was spent. There was no market for the electricity it would produce. The next government started up construction to create jobs. Howard Pauley's New Democrats scrambled to find a buyer. They did. In 2 years, an American utility will be buying Manitoba electricity for less than it costs to generate it. Until then, limestone will be producing power no one wants. That business decision alone is costing Manitobans $150 million a year. Politics were also behind decisions to keep major industries in Manitoba, with enticements of cheap power. Inco and Hudson's Bay Mining and Smelting are 2 examples. Governments using Manitoba Hydro to buy jobs.
If they don't work together, they may fall down together. And therefore, mutual survival becomes a mutual interest.
Once again, those interests are colliding with Manitoba's north. Colossal machines are making way for Manitoba Hydro's newest vision for the future, Kanawapa, a $6 billion dam and transmission line. As Hydro heads down the road to Kanawapa, will Manitobans get the feeling they've been down this route before? The Power Brokers continues after this. By the year 2001, this stretch of the Nelson River will have undergone a dramatic transformation, a $6 billion transformation. A generating station will straddle the banks of the river. A transmission line will snake its way south through the Manitoba wilderness. Its name, Kanawapa. Already a $20 million road to the site has created dozens of jobs. There are promises of thousands more.
I'll sign anything.
This is where Kanawapa was born. In 1989, the largest energy deal between 2 provinces is signed. Manitoba agrees to sell 1,000 megawatts of electricity to Ontario Hydro, enough to light up most of Toronto. The deal is worth $13 billion. Profits from the sale average more than $600 million a year. But there's a catch. If either side backs out, they'll have to pay. By the end of December, it will cost Manitoba $50 million if it breaks the agreement. Ontario will have to pay $215 million if it does. In 1994, the penalties will jump to $100 million for Manitoba, $575 million for Ontario. There will be no penalties if either side fails to get environmental approval.
The only rationale for building Kanawapa is to sell power to Ontario.
Consultant Dave Young says the deal is a poor one. He says profits from the sale to Ontario will barely cover the interest on Kanawapa's debt. When the sale runs out, Manitobans will still be stuck with the bill for Kanawapa.
But it's financed 100% by borrowed money. At the end of 30 years, it will still be financed 100% by borrowed money. It's not being paid for out of that contract.
Bob Brennan is president of Manitoba Hydro.
We borrow money. We repay the money. In some cases, we have to borrow more to accomplish that. But the way we're going to pay for them is charging you and every other customer based on the use that they're getting of those facilities.
I'm awestruck to be in such a huge facility.
Opponents feel Filmon's enthusiasm for hydro development means he's more inclined to build than not build.
Last year, Manitobans invested hundreds of millions of dollars in hydro bonds.
Critics point to a series of television commercials where Filmon encourages Manitobans to invest in hydro.
And the money you invest stays right here in Manitoba, working for all of us.
There isn't a politician that hasn't fallen prey to the same siren song that hydro continues to sing. And that's what really worries me, is because they've become even better at it. And I think that's of great concern to all Manitobans, that the servant has become the master.
As an engineer and a businessman, my only concern is that Manitoba Hydro be operated in as business-like a fashion as possible and in a way that contributes to the economic benefit of the people of Manitoba.
There are people who profit from hydro development, powerful people. People who run construction companies and labor organizations, all major players in the economy.
Well, there are some pretty powerful voices in the community telling governments, regardless of what person is the premier or the minister of this or that, or what party is in power, those voices are there saying, let's continue with this. Political parties and politicians in office notice that it's easier to win an election during a period of economic growth and prosperity than during a period of recession and economic decline, and so they will adopt whatever measures, short-term or long-term, they think are most likely to stimulate economic activity.
We have put in place checks and balances that were never there to ensure that those investments are not made for political reasons, but for good economic reasons, and they will pay dividends to the people of Manitoba.
At the time the board is weighing the financial impact.
This is the Public Utility Board hearing, one of the checks and balances Filmon is talking about. For the first time in the history of the province, Manitoba Hydro had to justify on economic grounds why Kanawapa and the energy sale to Ontario makes sense. It also had to answer to its harshest critics. When it was over, Hydro succeeded.
There's a sense that the PUB essentially gave Hydro everything they wanted and more without any very rigorous justification or evaluation.
Brian Pinnell is the lawyer for several environmental groups opposed to Kanawapa. He says the new public process is tainted.
The people on the PUB are appointed by the government of Manitoba, and there aren't very many constraints on that appointment.
One could make that argument about political appointments if they didn't make credible judgments. Nobody has said to me that they haven't thus far.
PUB's decision may be irrelevant. Back then, Manitoba Hydro said Kanawapa had to be built by the year 2000 to meet Manitoba's future power needs. Now, Hydro's latest projections show the dam won't be needed for another 10 years after that. Manitoba Hydro is building the dam not for Manitoba, but Ontario. Harold Neufeld is the minister responsible for Hydro.
We have an agreement with Ontario Hydro that is not reversible. Ontario Hydro, in the meantime, has made its projections and made its future decisions on the basis of 1,000 megawatts of firm power from Manitoba Hydro. It's too much involved to go back now.
What they have made Hydro is into a milk cow ready for the feeding of everybody else except the people of Manitoba.
We would need to develop the plant at some point in order to satisfy the demands of the Manitoba consumer. And we would need to pay the full costs of that development, not have somebody else share those costs with us, as Ontario Hydro is doing in this case.
Premier Filman believes he has good economic reasons to pick up where previous governments left off, building more dams in the north. However, he inherited the environmental havoc left behind by previous governments. Filman must now convince Manitobans history won't be repeated.
We know a great deal more today than we did in those days, and we know that projects shouldn't proceed unless they're environmentally sound and unless you've, as much as possible, taken all steps to mitigate the environmental damage that might occur, to anticipate, evaluate, and put in place means of limiting that environmental damage.
These are the steps announced by the Environment Minister, Glenn Cummings. For the first time, an environmental panel set up by both Manitoba and Ottawa will hold public hearings on whether the project should go ahead.
We believe that this will be the most comprehensive and environmental assessment that has ever been undertaken in this province.
At the same time as the announcement, the road to the Kanawapa Dam site is punched through northern Manitoba. The license to build the road is granted by the Environment Minister.
It taints the process and taints the decision.
New Democrat leader Gary Dewar says allowing construction before the environmental panel even begins hearings is a charade.
We're seeing $100 million spent on the pre-construction work. $100 million would be considered a lot of construction by most of us. Again, to have a totally independent process and a process that's perceived to be objective, you don't start any work on the project until the full environmental license is given.
Dennis Windsor is Manitoba Hydro's chief planner for the Kanawapa project.
The momentum of constructing the road is very minor in terms of the total part of the project, and the commitment to build the road and the construction of the road is not a commitment to the project.
Public participation is fundamental to this process.
The credibility of the government's environmental review process may have already collapsed.
The minister simply doesn't understand the process that he's involved in. And
opponents of Kanawapa, led by lawyer Brian Pennell, are angry over what they call government interference. Under provincial law, Pennell's clients are entitled to public funds to make their case against Kanawapa at the environmental hearings. The Environment Minister has limited that amount to $1 million. Hydro is spending at least $3 million.
We have refused to fight over crumbs. We are saying that we want a fair hearing on what should be fairly funded.
It's not meant to hobble the process. It's meant to make it abundantly clear to those out there who may say that they have a $5 million request, that perhaps there are ways that they can work with other people in the process.
The power brokers still press their vision of harnessing the energy flowing through Manitoba's northern rivers. They say the past has reshaped that vision. Ian Dixon, Manitoba Hydro's Vice President of Environmental Affairs.
The focus is to learn by what we've experienced in the past and apply it today and follow the rules and procedures that are set down for us.
In fact, they've learned their lesson well. It's one of the frightening things about these huge organizations is that they do learn, and they use the right language, they'll say the right thing, they'll be sympathetic and warm and comforting and all the rest of it. But they have one objective, and damn everybody and up with the dam.
You know, we have a process for public consultation. We have a process for public decision-making on all of these projects. And we will follow the process to the letter.
Manitobans have been left in the dark when past decisions concerning hydro development have been made. Those decisions have left behind a bitter and expensive legacy. Now their leaders promise an era of openness, an opportunity to share or reject their new vision. Manitobans must decide if it's a grand vision or an empty one. For 24 Hours, I'm Kirk Williams.
Indian people always visualize the land as being their mother. You know, it provided them the necessary security that a mother would. I wonder what value you would place on your mother because she has been injured or destroyed.
I'm Jim Compton. Tonight we continue our 5-part series on hydro development in Manitoba.
I'm Kirk Williams. Last night we traced how 3 decades of politicians succumbed to the lure of hydro development. They believe hydro projects provide jobs and energy for generations.
What politicians didn't budget for was the devastation to the land, the water, and the livelihoods of the people who live in the north. Now taxpayers must pay millions of dollars to make up for what was lost. A lot of that money is not going to where it's supposed to. Tonight, part 3, a question of trust.
You can see out there on the shoreline here. It's a little hard to fish the shoreline because there's so many sticks. And you wreck your nets or wreck your motor.
Sam Dysart is a fisherman. He lives in Nelson House, a community crippled by change. Every day, in every way, he and the other residents of this remote community are affected by the flooding caused by hydroelectric development. They live in the hope that one day life will be as good as it once was, that the promise to heal this wounded land and its people will be kept.
We've been here 2 weeks. We wrecked 2 motors. That's the price we have to pay out of our fish. And that's kind of expensive. Like today, I seen my brother pull out a 20-foot log on his net. Now what happens there, he had to take a knife and cut part of his net off. Now he should be catching fish instead of sticks or logs.
Governments in Manitoba Hydro knew building dams in the north would cause some environmental damage. They estimated they would have to pay about $5 million to compensate the people living near the power projects. Now that bill has soared to hundreds of millions of dollars. Some people say the final figure will reach $500 million. Damming the Nelson River has changed many things for the 15,000 people who live nearby. For centuries, they had lived in harmony with the land. Now the rivers are unrecognizable. In some places, the water is poisoned by mercury leaching out of the soil. In other places, the fish and wildlife have disappeared.
I see the loss of integrity of the people. They're not able to provide anything for their families. They have no productive life. They live a life that's dependent on welfare. They don't have any meaningful activities that so many people, Manitobans and Canadians, take for granted.
Cross Lake is one of the communities affected by hydro development. Hydro took the water away from the lake and shipped it down the Nelson River. It left Jack Brightnose and the others who live here literally high and dry.
I remember as a child in Cross Lake, you could set your net right outside of right at the river, and then you could just go there and pick up a few fish and distribute the rest that you didn't need to use. So it was very wealthy in a sense. It had the same kind of effects that the American Indian people experienced when the buffalo were decimated and the buffalo were wiped out by outside interests. This is the same kind of thing that is happening to the Aboriginal people of Cross Lake.
16 years ago, Manitoba Hydro and the government promised to make things right, clean up the mess, and compensate the people for the damage. After 2 years of hard negotiations, the bands affected by flooding and hydro signed this document, the Northern Flood Agreement. It promises, like treaties before it, to take care of the people forever. The agreement was signed in 1977 by 5 northern Indian bands, Manitoba Hydro, the province, and the Government of Canada. It promised 4 acres of land for everyone flooded. It promised compensation for lost fishing, hunting, and trapping. It promised to eradicate mass poverty and unemployment. Today, most people say the agreement has failed to make good on that last, but most important promise.
all that Hydro and Manitoba have really wanted to do is to offer the most minimal compensation to absolve themselves of responsibility, to basically say, look, this is not our problem.
Peter Usher and Martin Weinstein are experts on the impact of hydro development on Native people.
The intent, as I see it, of the Northern Flood Agreement was not to be an adversarial kind of arrangement. And the reality is that the Northern Flood Agreement is a very highly adversarial arrangement in which almost every claim that has been submitted is contested and has taken decades to settle, even simple claims. And that's the tragedy.
I think it has to be recognized that there is more than just Manitoba Hydro and the natives party to the agreement. There's a mix of responsibilities involving two other levels of government. And so when it comes time to determining who is responsible for eradication of poverty and maintaining and enhancing lifestyles, we'd like to suggest that a lot of that responsibility rests with Manitoba and Canada.
The reality is that we have an outstanding obligation that we inherited essentially from the Schreier administration, from those dams that were constructed and the flooding that was done in the 70s that has to be dealt with. And I hope that within my term of Premier we are going to settle those outstanding obligations that have gone past 3 administrations now without being settled.
So far, nearly $200 million Northern Flood Agreement dollars have poured into the affected communities. Much of it has gone to things like building houses and roads and providing sewer and water service. But a final settlement is elusive. One question remains: how do you put a price tag on a lost way of life?
What Hydro is doing is just like putting a body paint job on a vehicle that needs repairing, and with the belief that a new body which is going to make this automobile run better. It's not that way. The compensations and awards should be made towards developing the human condition and restoring the human condition so that people can fend for themselves.
Northern flood bands vow to hold Hydro to its word. For 14 years, they have held together and chipped away at Hydro to live up to the agreement. They have won some battles and gained some concessions for their people. However, they are still miles away from settling. This painfully slow process is now chipping away at the Northern Flood Committee's resolve and its image. Ahab Flett hunts for animals that are no longer there. He is an elder in the community of Split Lake. Earlier this year, he advised band members to leave the Northern Flood Committee behind and agreed to a compensation package offered by Hydro and the government.
$1 billion would never replace what we lost in terms of our livelihood. The government has never given us enough money. At least now, we have our own fund for a better future.
The tentative deal gives the people $46 million, control of their natural resources, and a huge tract of land as a final settlement. But at a price. Other bands say the people of Split Lake have given away the thing that makes a Northern Flood Agreement like the treaties of old.
Those rights belong to future generations just as much as they belong to me now. I would not do that just to get out of a jam today if I were in a jam. Just so I could reap the benefits now and enjoy it and make life easy for myself for a season. I wouldn't do it because they do not belong to me solely and exclusively. I have no right to sell them out.
But the people of Split Lake decided they could wait no longer. Chief Norman Flett says what amounts to $33,000 per band member is the best deal he could get for his people.
Negotiations, you have to give and take. Of course, it's never enough money, but you can't keep saying that, you know. So we just feel that it's a reasonable deal.
We've talked to some people from Split Lake, and I don't know, they're blinded by the dollar sign, I think.
What about the future of their people, the children, and also that are unborn? What kind of a deal will they make for them, and what can they do to recover any mistakes that they may do now?
They're deliberately stalling and withholding benefits from the four bands, knowing that they can wait us out, because we're poor people. If we wait long enough and the message gets out that Split Lake is getting this, that Split Lake is getting that they're going to be per capita payments, that each band member is going to get $1,000 or $500, and Norway House is getting nothing, then the pressure will come from inside Norway House to make me accept a similar deal.
The Northern Flood Committee, which represents the 4 remaining bands, is already under pressure. A CBC I-Team report earlier this year showed that thousands of dollars meant for recreation were wrongly spent by Rodney Spence, former chief of the Nelson House Band.
Rodney Spence received a $100,000 bonus and a free house.
Now people are beginning to ask questions about where the Northern Flood Agreement payments are going. In Norway House, documents have surfaced. The chief is getting $1,200 for attending each Northern Flood Committee meeting, says band member Myrna Gamblin.
Why would anybody require $1,200 a day for a meeting? I don't think General Motors does that for their corporate, executives or whatever. I don't even think Prime Minister Mulroney gives himself that kind of an honorarium. And if he did, the people of Canada would probably tear him apart.
We're getting $1,200 from time to time on board meetings that are called by the chair. Okay? That's what we get, and it covers everything, whether it's 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, or a week.
Millions of dollars have poured into the North over the last 15 years, yet real change for the better has been slow in coming. For many, the Northern Flood Agreement has become a monument to good intentions, a source of anger, suspicion, and frustration. But now all of this is about to change. We'll have that story when we return.
Racism! Racism!
The streets of downtown Winnipeg are far from the flooded wilderness around the Nelson River. But Native leaders know that they have to argue their case here, at the very seat of power.
These people don't have a right to go in here and warm up.
Yeah. Well, let's just have the demonstration and get it over with.
At the doors of power, they are turned away. It's security policy. But for the demonstrators, there is a bitter irony.
That's our heat you're using.
We're citizens, that's what.
The government's now, got this place like the Berlin Wall, for God's sakes.
Opposition leader Gary Dewar sides with the demonstrators. But the Northern Flood Agreement has a long and embarrassing history for everyone.
How much did Gary Dewar give you? How much did Ed Schreier give you? Ed Schreier built the dams that caused the problems that you're facing. This treaty was signed 15 years ago. And there have been a number of political parties in office in Ottawa and Manitoba and a number of administrations in charge of hydro. And we have all collectively failed to settle our outstanding issues in terms of the Northern Flood Agreement.
Come right in the foyer. Right here. In the foyer. Right here.
At last, the minister agrees to let the demonstrators in. This time, the confrontation ends peacefully. That may not be the case in the future.
We have a lot of respect for our chiefs.
I know you have. And if things don't get done, we're going to get things done. Well,
Native people realize now that they must play political hardball. Their message is clear. The Manitoba government dreams of more power. With Ontario as its partner, it wants to build a dam called Kanawapa. It plans to send Kanawapa's power down hydro lines through the wilderness of eastern Manitoba and Ontario. The plans show lines running through Indian country. This time, Native people say the government is in for a fight.
I don't trust them. Once they show that they can live up to what's expected of them, then we'd be in a position to negotiate with them. But at this point, there's a real mistrust for them because they haven't held up their end of the bargain with the other northern communities.
The area surrounding Poplar River is untouched, a hunting paradise. Like a lot of Native people, Vera Mitchell is determined to resist new hydro development on her land.
Me and what army, you might ask, but I've got a lot of supporters. Even if I'm not in a political position, I can get enough people together to prevent that from happening. And I know it'll happen because there's unity out there of Indian people. We can call across Canada for help, and I'm sure it'll come. I'm very positive about it.
The people of Northwest Ontario are angry too. Their land suffered from Ontario hydro flooding. They want compensation for the past and to be a partner in any future development. If not, Chief Roy MacDonald says Manitoba Hydro won't be able to deliver its power to Ontario. There will be roadblocks, and worse.
The councillors decide to block the road and tear down the transmission line and do away with hydro. Not let hydro vehicles go across our territory. I think that is sort of even trade. If they meet our demands, we should be able to walk with them in the way they want. But if we have to take another step into the drastic measures, that's what we'll have to do.
The governments and the electric utilities have raped and flooded our lands, poisoned our rivers, contaminated our fish with mercury. We paid the price.
Matthew Cooncombe is the Grand Chief of the Northern Quebec Cree, a people locked in a desperate struggle with the Quebec government over plans for new dams in that province. Now he and Native leaders from Manitoba and Ontario have formed a coalition to press for change.
The era of rhetoric is over. The era of studies and commissions is over. The era of governments weaseling out of their constitutional fiduciary responsibilities is over. This is the 90s. It's a time for action.
In the press, in court, and at environmental hearings, Aboriginal people everywhere are launching a sophisticated attack on hydro projects. They want settlements for past damage, the right to say no to future dams, the rights to be partners in any development on their land. This all spells trouble for Manitoba's ambitious plans for Kanawapa.
In the case of Kanawapa, as I understand it, less than 1 square mile of actual flooding taking place, very minimal impacts on the environment, entirely different from the projects that were done back in the 70s under the Schreier administration and that whole program that was done. I don't think it's fair or reasonable for people to stop a downstream project that has essentially no environmental damage in favor of settling matters that are well under negotiation and are coming close to a settlement.
But northern bands are planning to fight the Kanawapa development. The consequences for the government are expensive. If they can't come through with the power, Manitoba taxpayers will have to pay Hydro's customer, the province of Ontario, up to $100 million in penalties. But Native people say that for them, the price of power has always been too high.
This vast land, as far as we're concerned, nobody owns it, so we consider it ours. For generations, our people have been hunting on this land and trapping. We come up here whenever we want to, and nobody bothers us. We want to keep it that way without having somebody telling us you can't come here anymore. Because we've lost enough as it is already.
For 24 hours, I'm Jim Compton.
I'm Jim Compton. Over the past 3 nights, we've examined how politicians have fueled Manitoba's quest for electrical power. Manitobans now enjoy an abundant source of electricity, but it's not all as clean and cheap as once thought. There are hidden costs to the environment and to the people in the north.
Those costs are continuing to rise. I'm Kirk Williams here on the road to Kanawapa, Manitoba Hydro's largest and most expensive project to date. The cost, close to $6 billion. Some say Kanawapa isn't needed. Now, disturbing new evidence that Canadian hydro projects may be harming Hudson Bay and warming the planet. Tonight, part 4 of our series, Debating the Deal. Diesel and sweat punch a $20 million road through the north, the link needed to build the Kanawapa Dam. Once the road is built, men and machinery will disappear until an environmental panel rules whether they can return. Environmental hearings are new to Manitoba Hydro. It's never faced them in the past. A past littered with examples of what happens when there are no hearings. Flooded land, erosion, mercury poisoning, ruined lives. Manitoba Hydro says there are safeguards now. Ian Dixon, Vice President of Environmental Affairs.
There is a formal process that you have to go through today to satisfy the public and government that this corporation is doing the right thing in terms of proceeding with the Kanawapa project, if in fact we are given the license to proceed.
Hydro is spending a lot of money to convince the environmental panel to grant that license. So far, the utility has spent $6.5 million on environmental studies. Those studies support the building of Kanawapa. Dennis Windsor is in charge of the project.
It is an extremely good location for a hydroelectric generating station. There is very little flooding associated with it. The water is contained within the riverbanks.
Windsor says only a few square kilometers of shoreline will be flooded, a tiny fraction of the land now underwater from dams already up and running. Kanawapa would join that same network of mega projects. The second part of the environmental inspection, the transmission lines needed to send Kanawapa's power south. This is how Manitoba Hydro plans to do it. Spend more than $1 billion to cut a swath through this wilderness. 2 lines now run down the west side of Lake Winnipeg. Manitoba Hydro wants to build a third, called Bipole 3, down the east side. This eastern route is $200 million cheaper. The land is rich with wildlife. Manitoba's largest caribou herd makes its annual migration here. Up until now, nothing much has got in its way. It's been undisturbed throughout the ages. Allison Elliott is with the Manitoba Naturalist Society.
It's pristine wilderness. Wildlife thrives in the area, and with access, what comes with access are intrusive activities like poaching, impacts on wildlife that perhaps the wildlife can't accommodate.
We think we can build a transmission line that really doesn't have an awful lot of effect on the wilderness.
It's Ken Adams' job to steer Manitoba Hydro through the environmental hearings. He says Hydro has taken the caribou migration into account.
There could be some effects during the construction period. The presence of people is a fact, but once the construction is finished, our advice is that the effects on caribou would be insignificant.
Manitoba Hydro will make those arguments in support of Kanawapa before an environmental panel. It wants to restrict the debate to the present, to the environmental impacts of Kanawapa and the transmission line connected to it. Across the table from Hydro, its opponents, people who will argue that Kanawapa is part of a massive environmental problem from the past, which will only get worse.
It's sort of building a house of sand if you're going to leave all the important questions out of the investigation. And these are the most fundamental questions for an environmental assessment to address itself to. If they're absent, it's not worth doing.
Brian Pinnell is a lawyer representing a coalition of environmental groups who want to examine the entire hydro issue. Pinnell will be out to convince the panel that Kanawapa does not stand alone, that it's part of Manitoba Hydro's Nelson and Churchill River system. He will argue it's the same system that continues to pollute northern communities like South Indian Lake.
Every year, South Indian Lake erodes more, and the erosion process causes the buildup of the methyl mercury, which eventually reaches its way into the fishery and into Nelson River. That will continue, and Kanawapa will be a part of the infrastructure that relies on it continuing.
Kanawapa environmental hearings are not the place to address anything that may have happened in the past. The Kanawapa environmental hearings are there to assess the impacts of the Kanawapa project.
Until now, Manitoba Hydro's effect on the environment appears to be confined to Manitoba. While people here try to cope with diverted rivers and flooded land, far greater damage may lie ahead. This is Hudson Bay. Rivers from Manitoba, Ontario, and Quebec end up here. These same rivers are being used extensively by all three provinces to generate electricity. Problem is, nobody knows what these hydro projects are doing to the bay. Hundreds of kilometers of Manitoba borders on a huge inland sea, a sea that sometimes contains all the fury of an ocean. On other days, it becomes a sheet of glass, playfully creating mirages, blurring the line where sea meets sky. It's a northern sea. Its frigid waters teem with life, strung together in a delicate chain. The world's largest population of beluga whales, estimated at 30,000, come to the bay to chase schools of fish. Polar bears roam the edge of the bay, feeding off the abundance of life. Ducks come to the shore to raise their young, and ptarmigans find refuge in the Arctic tundra nearby. At the top of that food chain, native people who use the animals for food, for clothing, all depend on each other for survival in an ecosystem that is easily upset. Manitoba Hydro's dams have radically altered two of Canada's major rivers flowing into Hudson Bay. It has dammed one, the Churchill, preventing all but a trickle from reaching the sea. The Churchill River's energy has been diverted into the Nelson, where it is manipulated by spillways. When the rivers reach Hudson Bay, they bring poison, mercury, leached from the flooded soil around many of Hydro's reservoirs. Beyond Manitoba's shores, the problem is amplified. Moose River developments in Ontario and the James Bay Hydro Project in Quebec all rely heavily on reservoirs. All three utilities manipulate major rivers as they flow into Hudson and James Bays. All three utilities have even more ambitious plans for the future. John Turner is part of a native coalition opposed to hydro development around Hudson and James Bays.
You can't look at these projects in isolation of each other. At some point, we're going to have to look at the impact of all of these projects on the whole ecosystem of James Bay and Hudson's Bay, because these ecosystems don't stop at provincial boundaries, and the birds and the animals don't recognize provincial boundaries, and it's an ecosystem that the people are a part of, and it's all going to be impacted.
Stephen Hazel is with the Canadian Arctic Research Committee.
First of all, there is a grave danger of methylmercury contamination, because as the very many rivers around Hudson Bay, James Bay, in Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec, as they become dammed up, you get higher levels of methylmercury in the reservoirs. That builds up in the fish and then flows out into Hudson Bay, James Bay. You could see elevated levels of toxic mercury in beluga whales. And to a large extent, we have very little information. I mean, James Bay, Hudson's Bay, the marine region has been called a black hole for science. There's been so little work done, basic scientific work done on the wildlife and on the ecosystems. It's disgraceful.
In Manitoba, Kanawapa opponents want Manitoba Hydro's plans put on hold until more is known about Hudson Bay.
The odds are that something will go awry. I mean, when you tamper with established systems, usually you're going to have some negative fallout in terms of life systems, and we've seen it already, and I expect we'll see more of it. The more we continue on grand schemes of rerouting rivers and damming rivers.
Well, we don't believe that the Kanawapa project is going to have any significant effect on Hudson's Bay. We are not adding water, we are not taking water out, we are not changing the quality of the water, we will not be changing the flow pattern. There will be minimal, if any, measurable differences on the discharge into Hudson's Bay from what the current situation is.
You have to look at all of the projects, all of their potential implications, and try and get some handle on the wide picture. And that has to be done this time around. There's no leaving it to tomorrow this time.
There's an awful lot of things that we don't know about the environment, and if everything was stopped until we thought we knew everything, I don't think that's a realistic scenario.
While scientists have conclusively linked the vast areas of flooded land with mercury poisoning in fish, they now suspect these huge man-made bodies of water may actually be destroying our atmosphere. The problem is invisible. It was discovered flooding created by hydro dams produced gases, the same gases which contribute to the greenhouse effect. What's still unknown is how much gas is produced, and to find out, scientists are creating a reservoir of their own by flooding this small lake in northwestern Ontario. Their work could have a profound impact on future hydro projects.
Okay, this is bottle 537.
Carol Kelly and John Rudd head up a team of scientists at the experimental lakes area near Kenora. They're conducting a unique experiment. Kelly and Rudd are looking at two gases, methane and carbon dioxide.
Okay.
When released into the atmosphere, the gases help form a barrier which traps the Earth's heat. It's called greenhouse warming. Both gases are found naturally. They are produced when plants and other aquatic life decompose on the bottom of lakes. Sometimes you can see the gases bubble up from the mud.
Okay, next one.
Kelly and Rudd record how much gas is released so they have something to compare later. In 2 years, this entire lowland area will be flooded. The scientists are creating a miniature version of a hydro reservoir.
We'll get a net difference in how much greenhouse gas is going into the atmosphere now and then how much greenhouse gas is going in after. And we expect the total amount to increase by quite a bit.
If this experiment proves hydro reservoirs spew out vast amounts of greenhouse gases, the environmental consequences could be enormous.
335.
Temperatures could go up, polar ice caps melt, oceans rise, and fertile land becomes parched and barren. At the moment, the amount of land flooded by hydro development in Canada is equal to the size of Lake Erie. Plans are being made to expand that flooding by 50%.
We shouldn't just continue on building more and more reservoirs and thinking that there's no problem, because there might be, and we might need to consider this in our decision making.
Results from Kelly and Rudd's work will be released over the next 5 years. They threaten to punch a hole in the claims hydro companies have made for years, that hydroelectric power is environmentally friendly, cleaner than other power sources.
It would make production of power by hydroelectric power plants as dirty in terms of greenhouse gases as would be coal-fired plants.
Rudd and Kelly's final conclusions won't be complete in time for the environmental hearings on Kanawapa. However, opponents, armed with what they do know, may take their most aggressive stand yet. Demand to undo the damage of the past, to dismantle the dam on the Churchill River, allowing it to flow again to Hudson Bay. Biological consultant John Whitaker.
We only have a few more years to do that before you won't be able to reverse it, but I think it's something that we should be looking at.
My initial reaction to that is that we probably would be compounding a problem that already exists as you tinker once again with Mother Nature.
Bob Newberry is an expert on rivers and streams.
A simple change in the dam would put the Churchill River back in its old channel. And for a simple change in how you operate those gates, you could gain about 300 kilometers of natural river channel and lakes. It'll be the best environmental buy in the world.
Hydroelectric development in Manitoba finds itself at the crossroads. In just over a year, the Environmental Panel will rule if Kanawapa is judged on its own or as a continuation of the past. Manitoba Hydro has preliminary plans for 8 more dams after Kanawapa. The next would be built on the Burntwood River, flooding this area. After that, Hydro hopes to build generating stations on 2 untouched northern rivers. They are the last of Manitoba's great rivers that carve through the Canadian Shield to Hudson Bay. Kanawapa may become a symbol of a much larger debate, whether to continue down the road of hydro development or to look for new paths to meet Manitoba's energy needs. For 24 Hours, I'm Kirk Williams.
If we can use more brains and less electricity to do the same thing cheaper, then we ought to do it. I think if you take economics seriously, you probably won't ever build any more dams.
No matter how aggressive we get with conservation, we're going to have to build new dams.
Conservation is an alternative for the future. It is not an alternative for the present.
There are hydroelectric junkies who are used to building hydroelectric dams. They don't know how to withdraw from this activity.
I'm Jim Compton.
I'm Kirk Williams.
This week, 24 Hours has dissected the debate over hydro development in northern Manitoba. Once touted as a cheap and clean source of energy, the past proves it's not cheap or clean. There are warnings the future could be even more costly.
Part of that cost will be Kanawapa, a $6 billion project. Both Manitoba Hydro and the government say it's needed to meet future demands for power. Others say building more dams is not the answer. They point to utilities around the world that are finding out it's cheaper to conserve than construct. Tonight, The Price of Power concludes with Part 5, Conserving the Future. As darkness falls on the towns and cities, the power of electricity is reflected in the skyscape, visibly defining our reliance. It is the engine of the modern age, driving industries that power the economy. It carries information to our offices and homes, at the same time heating or cooling them. It runs machines that breathe for people who can't. It provides comfort, saves lives. Electricity is Manitoba's richest resource, abundant, seemingly inexhaustible. Manitoba Hydro engineered that abundance. It transformed the north by constructing huge dams to harness the power of the rivers. Massive transmission lines carved through the wilderness, carrying electricity to the south. The price for that electricity is cheap, far below the cost of building the dams. To pay for its mega projects, Manitoba Hydro must sell power, lots of power. In the 60s, the campaign was aggressive and simple. It's your power, use it. In those days, when environmental consciousness was dormant, Hydro predicted an insatiable demand for electricity. Politicians of the day were afraid. Stop building dams, and future generations would be in the dark. Hydro's predictions were in fact wrong. Demand went up half as much as planners thought. Construction was stopped on the limestone generating station for years. The push is now on for Kanawapa. 2 years ago, Hydro predicted it would be needed by the year 2000. But already its predictions or load forecasts are off. The utility now says the extra power won't be needed for at least another 10 years after that. Bob Brennan is the president of Manitoba Hydro.
You have to remember a load forecast is just a load forecast. What we probably know is the actual load of that particular year will probably not be exactly what we're forecasting it to be today in any event. But it's our best estimate of what it'll be 10 years from now, 20 years from now.
Both Hydro and the government insist that Kanawapa must be built anyway, because the electricity it will produce has already been sold to Ontario for $13 billion. That money will pay the interest on Kanawapa's debt. Energy Minister Harold Neufeld says Manitobans will eventually need Kanawapa once the Ontario deal runs out.
We're concerned that there would be brownouts, and it's for that reason that we ensure that the generation is built in order to avoid brownouts.
Why would you build a project if you don't need it? And why would you build it if there are better alternatives?
Environmental lawyer Brian Pinnell says those alternatives are to stop building dams and start using electricity more wisely.
You look at the future and you say, well, if they really make an effort at conserving energy and taking the recession into account, we probably don't need new generation in Manitoba until the second decade of the 21st century.
Utilities around the world are already putting planned mega projects on hold. They're leaving rivers and valleys alone, embracing new ideas of how to profit by building less and saving more. Revolutionary ideas are challenging the concept that utilities like Manitoba Hydro have to keep on building mega projects to meet future demands for electricity. Those ideas are coming out of the Rocky Mountain Institute here in Snowmass, Colorado. Here, energy efficiency is not some utopian ideal, but a very practical reality. The Institute is helping utilities all over the world save millions of dollars by getting their customers to use a lot less energy.
So that should get you a good start.
Amory Lovins is an energy analyst and founder of the Rocky Mountain Institute. The Institute promotes the efficient use of energy. Lovins and his staff are consultants to huge corporations and utilities around the world. Utilities like BC Hydro and Ontario Hydro. Companies that are finding out energy efficiency has a real impact on the bottom line.
Well, this is the jungle. I commute to work across the jungle.
The Institute is both workplace and home for Lovins. It's a living example of how to save energy. In the high altitude of the Colorado Rockies, Lovins grows bananas year-round.
We got 5 crops from it last winter. In fact, we had.
It costs him $5 a month to heat the building. There's no furnace, yet it's warm enough for 3 pet iguanas. The secret is the solarium.
It's providing a lot of extra heat to the rest of the building. That's why we don't need a furnace. It's scattering light around from the white plaster into the sides of the building. That saves about 95% of our lighting energy. It's collecting the hottest, most humid air to the top, and then we pull it down through a couple of ducts into a big heat exchanger, so we get back 3/4 of the heat but get rid of the excess humidity in the winter. And finally, the wall under the vents up there has 100 meters of plastic pipe cast into it, and that does most of our water heating. What keeps the house comfortable year-round, even down to minus 44 C outside, is super insulation and super windows. They consist of 2 sheets of glass plus a plastic film with high-tech coatings that let light through but reflect heat, and then we fill it all up with argon gas, which insulates better than air. You know, now with windows twice that good, you'd have a lot of safety margin even in such a severe climate. There are a bunch of things you can do to fluorescent lights in a kitchen or even in an office that save 70 to 90% of the electricity. And one of them is to combine efficient lamps, fixtures, and ballasts with special controls. This black thing's a photocell. It looks down and sees how much daylight is coming in and then dims the lamps by that much. When I turn this on, it'll come on bright, and then in a moment it'll dim down. There it goes, because of all the daylight that the photocell senses. So we don't need to have that much electric light. Now, if everybody in the U.S. did this sort of thing to the fluorescent lights, it would save 60 1,000 megawatt power plants.
There are 1,000 products on the market that save energy, and the numbers are growing.
Another thing we're doing here is using probably the most efficient refrigerator and freezer in the world. The refrigerator uses about 8% and the freezer about 15%, the normal amount of electricity.
This handmade super-insulated refrigerator is a prototype. It costs $1,900, but will pay for itself in 10 years. Most products pay for themselves after a couple of years. Some even make money. Using solar panels on the roof, Lovins produces about 1/3 of the electricity he needs. The rest comes from the local utility.
That's in this meter, and how much we make with photovoltaic
At times,
panels
he
with
sells the
sunlight on
utility
roof.
power.
Well, this meter runs both ways. It keeps track separately of how much they sell us and how much we sell them, and every quarter we settle up. They send us a check.
The energy Lovins saves in his home goes back to the utility where it can be sold to someone else. The utility profits because it doesn't have to pay to generate new power.
For very good economic reasons. Efficiency works better and costs less than generating more electricity.
That's why Lovins says Manitoba Hydro is wasting its money building another dam.
The cheapest way to meet your energy service needs, to get the hot showers and cold beer and so on, is to use much more efficiently what we have. And then Manitoba's existing hydro capacity, already installed, already paid for, is a lot more than you need to run the province very nicely for a very long time.
Can we see the point where we might not even see future dams being built?
Sure. I think if you take economics seriously, you probably won't ever build any more dams.
That's the same advice Lovins is giving to 70 other utilities in 30 countries. He says in 10 years, energy efficiency will become a $30 billion business.
That's very big business, and people are investing in that because they know it works, they know they make money on it, not because it's a pie in the sky.
2 years ago, BC Hydro bought Lovins' ideas and created PowerSmart. It launched an aggressive advertising campaign encouraging people to use less energy. It offers incentives to consumers to replace old appliances with energy-efficient ones.
And BC Hydro will rebate you $50 cold cash.
Industrial and commercial customers receive free advice and rebates for revamping their operations. PowerSmart will cost BC Hydro $600 million over 20 years. It's already saved them a lot more. By the year 2000, a $3 billion hydroelectric dam was to be built on this section of the Peace River. It was shelved indefinitely. PowerSmart freed up the excess energy the utility needed.
This should be an easy switch.
Last spring, Manitoba Hydro also bought into PowerSmart. Jerry Rose is head of the PowerSmart program at Manitoba Hydro.
Costs are rising. Generating stations are becoming more expensive. Manitoba Hydro is recognizing the environmental impacts of the things it's doing and the costs that we're going to have to incur because of those environmental impacts. So the cost of electricity is becoming higher. So with the higher benefits that are going to occur from conservation, we can afford to invest more money.
Hydro's plan is to conserve 100 megawatts a year, enough energy to light up 3 towns the size of Steinbach. That represents slightly less than 3% of all the electricity Hydro produces.
No matter how aggressive we get with conservation, we're going to have to build new dams. We in Manitoba are working very hard to expand our economic base and to create jobs for our children. And we want our economy to grow. A growing economy requires more electricity.
They're an institution full of engineers and hydrologists who are used to building hydroelectric dams. They don't know how to do much different, and they have a tremendous momentum in the direction of building those dams. They're in some sense, hydroelectric junkies.
That's not our business. Our business is to come up with a development plan that is the most economic and results in the lowest rates for our customers. We're concerned about reliability and we're concerned about risk. And conservation has a role to play in that.
Rather than forecasting demand and figuring out when they build the next dam, I would give up preconceptions about whether they ought to build any dams at all, and instead look at all ways to make or save electricity, all ways to meet customers' needs, arrange them in order of increasing cost, and commit yourself to doing the cheapest things first. Now, if you do that and work your way up in cost, you'll find that dams are way off here somewhere. They're about the last thing you would do.
Does Manitoba need Kanawapa, a $5.7 billion project in transmission line, do you think?
I can't imagine what for. It's more efficient.
Lovins points to utilities in California that give away energy-efficient light bulbs. It's cheaper than building new dams.
In Manitoba, we can't afford to do that. It is cheaper for us to supply electricity than it is to give away light bulbs. And so that's what we're going to do.
Rose says it's unfair to compare Manitoba Hydro's conservation goals with other utilities. Californians pay 3 times more for electricity than Manitobans.
We can't go around borrowing targets from other people. They have to be Manitoba targets. They have to suit the marketplace in Manitoba.
Rose says building dams is still cheaper in Manitoba than not building. Construction boosts the economy. Kanawapa will generate thousands of jobs. And Manitoba businesses can expect millions of dollars in economic spin-offs before the dam is finished in 10 years. Opponents say building dams is an expensive way to get the economy moving and create employment.
It's a lot cheaper not to build the dams, to spend less money than that on efficiency and have a lot of money left over. Building a dam actually loses net jobs for the province. There's about nothing you can build in Manitoba that gives you fewer jobs per dollar than that. So if you spent the money any other way, you'd get more jobs out of it. And in particular, if you spent the money on efficiency, which costs roughly a tenth as much, the jobs you would get would not only be more numerous and last for decades rather than just a boom-bust construction camp sort of thing, they would be distributed throughout the province.
Manitobans could soon be faced with new and innovative ways to save energy and produce it. New technology will harness power from clean sources like the sun and the wind. Manitoba is bountifully blessed with both. But for now, Manitoba Hydro plans to tap even more energy from northern rivers, leaving behind a legacy of hydro dams for future generations. We'll look at the province's long-term energy plan when Conserving the Future returns after this. In California's sun-baked Mojave Desert, technology for tomorrow in use today. This is the world's largest solar-powered generating system. Within 3 years, it will produce enough electricity to meet the needs of more than 1 million people. High above a San Francisco suburb, 50-meter blades capture the power of the wind. More than 15,000 turbines replace 3.5 million barrels of oil to generate electricity. California's utilities exploit the sun and the wind for energy. Even though the technology is expensive, people here oppose building more hydro dams. Coal-fired generating stations pollute, and there's fierce opposition to nuclear power. Local and state governments recognize the utilities have few options. They've offered generous tax breaks and incentives to make these alternatives affordable. Amory Lovins knows that Manitoba Hydro does not face the same public scrutiny. He says that's no excuse.
Hydro's done such a good job providing cheap electricity by continental standards that I think many people didn't pay as much attention as they should to the efficiency revolution that was meanwhile creeping up on them. And from working with other hydros across Canada, I know that many of them are very excited about how much better they're going to do their jobs with how much more financial benefit to their customers.
Even with PowerSmart, Manitoba Hydro is not going as far as other Canadian utilities. There are no large rebates on new, efficient appliances, no ambitious targets to conserve energy.
See how it shoots out like that? That definitely means that there's air coming in through there, and that's outside air.
At the same time, government programs designed to chop energy consumption are themselves being chopped. This is Home Check. It was cut by the Conservatives in last spring's budget. Until last February, homeowners could have their houses checked for energy efficiency. Experts from the Energy Department gave tips on ways to conserve power. The service was free.
The header area again where it's blowing here, you can seal this up fairly good.
Home Check is now run by Manitoba Hydro. The service is available only to the few homeowners with electric heat. In 1988, the Conservatives shut down the Manitoba Energy Council, an advisory group which advocated conservation over hydro development. In August of this year, the government cut the Manitoba Energy Authority, a liaison between government and hydro.
I think the voices for change, for new thinking, are being stifled. I'm quite certain of that.
University professor Carl Ridd is the past chairman of the Energy Council.
This government is environmentally, I think, careless, maybe even indifferent, but certainly careless, and I think has relatively little interest in conservation, for example, certainly on the grand scheme. I mean, the minister, if the government were more serious, the government would have a more serious minister on this who was pushing harder than Mr. Neufeld appears to be pushing.
Well, as you know, that the Manitoba government has faced with difficult times. Our resources have been cut back to a bare minimum.
The cuts have left Energy Minister Harold Neufeld with a hydro staff of one, himself. An accountant by trade, Neufeld admits he has no background in hydro issues.
The very knowledge that I don't have the expertise within to operate a utility is a benefit to me, and I do not come with preconceived ideas. I come with an open mind. I have to rely on the best information I can get out of hydro, and I think and I have to decide for myself whether or not I can rely on it, and that's a decision. That's a subjective decision.
Premier Gary Filmon says hydro's past mistakes can be blamed on the political meddling of past governments. That's why his government has pulled out of the hydro business.
If there is no business case to be made for it, they shouldn't go ahead with it. And it's immaterial to me whether that happens to dictate that they do develop a dam or they don't develop a dam while I'm Premier.
While politicians are reluctant to give direction to hydro, they don't shy away from throwing the switch at opening ceremonies.
Lighting up the future.
This one in September at the Limestone Generating Station.
It is so easy to have the headlines, $3 billion project, thousands of jobs. The politician doesn't have to think, and he's able to leave really literally everything to the Crown Corporation. Well, the Crown Corporation loves that because they make all the decisions.
As a lawyer, Udi Hentelif has closely monitored hydro development over the last 3 decades.
They have one responsibility, to build power dams, to prepare power. That's what they're supposed to do, and that's what they're going to do. And I said before that in terms of any other thing they have to consider is what I described as the least possible alternative. They'll do only that which is necessary in order to allay suspicion and fear.
As president of Manitoba Hydro, Bob Brennan is out to prove his critics wrong.
The challenges facing Manitoba Hydro are great. The staff of Manitoba Hydro can meet those challenges no matter what they are, and I'm confident that they can do that. So I don't see this as some kind of a train going down a track and won't stop or make a turn. When the track turns, the track's turning, and we're able to turn with it.
The hydro legacy has unfolded over 3 decades, a legacy that was hidden in Manitoba's northern wilderness. The costs to the people and their environment have yet to be added up, much less paid for. Those costs shatter the claim that hydropower is both clean and cheap. Yet the building of dams continues, and now politicians have handed Manitoba Hydro even more power to meet the province's future energy needs. That power can't be unplugged from the past. For 24 Hours, I'm Kirk Williams.